The confrontation between Dana and Carter begins as chaos. Trash floating in the pool, broken furniture, the echo of a party gone wrong, but quickly reveals itself as something deeper, a clash of generations, expectations, and buried emotion, where anger becomes the language of disappointment and affection becomes the quiet current beneath the scolding. What starts as a landlord chastising an irresponsible tenant evolves into an intimate portrait of two women, one older, one younger, navigating the fraught terrain between authority and connection, independence and belonging. Through a queer lens, this scene pulses with subtext not because of what is shown, but because of what is withheld. The tenderness that keeps slipping through Dana's anger, the shame that trembles in Carter's apology, and the way both women seem to circle around something they can't quite name. For many queer viewers, this dance between confrontation and care feels achingly familiar. The way affection hides in reprimand, the way longing often emerges from conflict because direct emotional expression has never been safe. Dana's fury is not just about the trashed pool or ruined carpet. It is the eruption of a woman who has spent too long trying to keep her world orderly, who is used to maintaining control as the only way to preserve dignity in a life that constantly undermines women's authority. Carter's reckless youth mirrors the freedom Dana has long suppressed. She is unguarded, impulsive, unafraid of mess, a kind of emotional chaos Dana secretly envies, but cannot admit to desiring. When Dana calls Carter irresponsible and a liability, she's echoing the ways women have been conditioned to fear vulnerability and spontaneity, especially when it threatens to dismantle the image of composure that society demands from them. Yet beneath her reprimand lies the unmistakable trace of concern, even of wounded affection, a disappointment that only comes from someone who cares. Carter's repeated apologies, her stammering desperation to fix things, expose not only guilt but a longing for forgiveness that transcends tenant-landlord dynamics. Her words, "You're like a big sister I never had, you're the most important thing to me," are the language of transference, the aching emotional vocabulary of someone who seeks validation from an older woman she admires, perhaps even loves in a way she cannot fully articulate. For queer audiences, especially those who have experienced the blurred lines of mentorship, admiration, and emotional attachment between women, this dynamic rings painfully true. The way affection can slip into reverence, the way connection can become a mirror for self-discovery. Dana's discomfort when Carter admits she looks up to her, and her instinct to push her away, to restore professional distance, reflects how older queer women often internalize shame, fearing that intimacy with younger women will be misinterpreted or condemned. This fear doesn't stem from predation but from the centuries-old suspicion that women's closeness is inherently suspect, that affection between women must always be sanitized, coded, or justified as maternal, platonic, or professional. The scene unfolds as a negotiation between those boundaries. Dana insists on authority, Carter insists on emotional recognition, and somewhere between the shouting and apologies, the walls between them momentarily falter. When Dana says, "I feel really violated," it's not only about the physical intrusion of Carter entering her house, it's about emotional exposure, the fear of being seen too clearly by someone who wasn't supposed to matter this much. For queer women, that feeling of violation often arises not from harm, but from visibility, from realizing that another woman has glimpsed a private tenderness you've spent years suppressing. Carter's apology, her insistence that she meant no harm, becomes an attempt to restore safety to that moment of unintentional honesty. The scene is not about seduction, it's about recognition. Two women confronting the boundaries that keep them from being fully themselves. Dana's rigidity softens not because she's charmed, but because Carter's remorse opens a crack in her own emotional armor. When Carter tells her, "You're like a big sister I never had," she's trying to translate love into an acceptable language to make her feelings legible within heteronormative comfort zones. But Dana's reaction, the hesitation, the eventual thaw, suggests she understands that what passes between them cannot be reduced to roles like sister, mentor, or friend. There's something more primal and human there, the longing to be seen, to be needed, to connect across difference. For women viewers, this may recall relationships that defy easy labels, the older colleague who becomes a confidant, the friend whose opinion matters more than anyone's, the mentor whose approval feels like sunlight. These connections, often dismissed as complicated or intense, are the emotional backbone of many women's lives, yet they're rarely portrayed on screen with the depth this scene allows. As Dana's anger ebbs and her exhaustion surfaces, "I had a really stressful trip," she confesses. The power dynamic subtly shifts. She begins to speak less like an authority figure and more like someone who's simply tired of pretending she has it all together. Carter's response, gentle, sincere, eager to soothe, marks her transition from the careless tenant to the caretaker, and in that role reversal lies something profoundly queer, the recognition that love, in its most honest form, is mutual vulnerability. The scene's emotional climax comes not through words but through silence, through pauses filled with unspoken understanding. When Dana accepts Carter's gesture of comfort, what unfolds is not about transgression but about the small mercy of letting oneself be held. It's a moment that many queer women know intimately. That fragile liminal space where touch means relief rather than desire, where the need for connection outweighs the fear of judgment. The camera, lingering but not voyeuristic, honors that intimacy as something emotional, not erotic. It reminds viewers that women's closeness can exist outside the binaries of sex and sisterhood. In that moment, Dana and Carter both shed the identities society has imposed upon them, the responsible adult, the reckless youth, and become simply two women trying to make sense of each other. Dana's line, "Maybe I was a little irrational," lands like a quiet confession, an acknowledgement that anger was easier than admitting how much she cares. For queer viewers, that surrender, that permission to soften, feels like an act of resistance in itself. It's a refusal of the patriarchal logic that equates control with strength and emotional transparency with weakness. By allowing herself to empathize with Carter, Dana reconnects with the part of herself that once made mistakes, that once sought connection without calculating the consequences. And Carter, by expressing contrition and admiration rather than defiance, steps into emotional maturity. She learns that intimacy is built not on thrill but on trust. Together, they enact a kind of intergenerational healing, the older woman confronting her fear of vulnerability, the younger one learning responsibility through empathy rather than punishment. This dynamic, seen through a queer feminist lens, becomes a parable about how women can mother, mentor, and mirror each other's growth outside patriarchal scripts. It also exposes society's ongoing discomfort with women's emotional intimacy, the instinct to label or pathologize it rather than let it exist as truth. Even today, female tenderness is often seen as threatening when it isn't tethered to heterosexual safety. A woman's anger, when directed at another woman, is legible, but her affection is not. This discomfort stems from the enduring fear of what happens when women no longer depend on men for emotional validation, when they become each other's witnesses, healers, and homes. The Dana Carter scene unsettles that fear by showing two women moving from conflict to connection, without mediation, without a man to translate their emotions or resolve their tension. The rawness of their interaction, messy, unpredictable, grounded in care, offers an authenticity that queer and female audiences crave, the acknowledgement that women's relationships, in all their contradictions, are central to their humanity. By the end, when Dana admits she freaked out and Carter quietly agrees, what remains is a fragile peace, a shared understanding that they both overreacted because they both cared. This emotional honesty, stripped of romance but full of love, is what makes the scene so queerly resonant. It's about seeing the full humanity of another woman, even when she frustrates you, even when she reflects the parts of yourself you'd rather ignore. For LGBTQ+ viewers, this moment speaks to the ongoing journey of learning to love without shame, to express emotion without apology, and to find connection in unexpected places. The scene's brilliance lies in how it refuses spectacle. It doesn't sensationalize their intimacy but dignifies it, presenting women's emotional lives as rich, valid, and worthy of serious attention. It challenges the viewer to sit in discomfort, the same discomfort society feels toward women who care for each other too deeply, who cross the invisible lines of propriety drawn to keep them apart. Dana and Carter's confrontation becomes, in the end, a microcosm of women's struggle for emotional autonomy, the right to feel without justification, to connect without fear. In this moment, amid broken furniture and apologies, two women glimpse the possibility of a world where their closeness is not a crisis, but a kind of quiet, necessary grace.